Hello everyone, welcome back to the Brightworks. Today, taking a look, as the title might indicate, at the new and improved Nuke Rush guide. Now, a little forewarning to this, right? Do not just do this in every game, please. I am begging you, as a friend, as a mentor, as a fellow player, make sure that you talk to your team, make sure that you give them some heads up about what you're doing, make sure to communicate, and be a team player. Really helps the whole mentality of the group. And I'm sure your team would be more than happy to let you do it as long as you communicate properly and you assure them that you've seen a guide or two and you know what you're doing. Now, let's get into this guide, so to speak. Now, if you didn't know, I did already post a Nuke Rush video that showed you how to Nuke Rush on a different map called Ice Cream. And that map features a specific spot that was really, really popular for Nuke Rushing. And in fact, the developer for the map, the map maker, actually changed the spot so that it was less appealing to do a nuke rush. So you can't actually rush out a nuke quite so fast on that map anymore. So I figured I would release a general nuking guide that just starts with 3 metal extractors, which is pretty much what you're going to start with on most games. And I've chosen DSDR because not only is this a pretty popular map, but it also has a dedicated economy spot or a tech spot, which is the player over here. Typically, they're going to be in charge of doing some sort of greedy strategy, quote unquote. And nuke rushing, well, it's about as greedy as it gets. So you'll see I went for 3 metal extractors right off the bat, followed off with 3 wind harvesters, 3 windmills, as you might call them, wind turbines, as the game might call them. Big fans, as I might call them, just like everybody who watches all my videos, I'm sure. And so we're going to transition off of that into the energy storage in order to allow us to collect energy a little more efficiently, make sure we don't overflow it, and then we go into our bot lab. And the bot lab is important because it's cheap, the bots are relatively fast, and they're going to be able to build themselves quick enough without our commander having to worry about building them. Now, I am e-stalling a little bit here, and that's just a factor of the wind being so low. A little bit of randomness there that you're not really going to be able to deal with, because I don't think you'd want to do this with solar collectors, because I think it might be too much metal. And it's probably possible if you shifted it around. I tried one where I did solar collectors and I didn't make it work, but I decided to just go with wind after that. Of course, it also depends on the map that you're playing on, right? This map has a very high variance. It can go from 1 to 16. So when it's 16, times are good. When it's 1, times are bad. But I don't think it has too much of an impact here. There are other things that I'll point out as they come up that I think have a much more significant impact on how successful this rush actually is, and we'll take a look at that together. Note that I didn't claim exactly what time the nuke launches and lands at. That's because I don't want to misquote like I did last time. I don't want to accidentally tell you guys the wrong time. So instead, we're just going to watch this together. And I know that it's sub 20. I think it's around 15 minutes. But we'll get the exact time for you when the time comes. If it's not in the video title, of course, which probably will be. It's trying to switch away from the wind metal, or the wind metals, the wind turbines into advanced solar collectors about as fast as I can. You can see that I was almost e-stalling there because the wind was so terrible, and it's just really important to get off that sketchy wind energy as quickly as possible. Also, so you can just build up to a more efficient energy source, right? If we take a look at these, it's 370 metal versus each of these wind turbines is 37. So it's exactly 10 times the cost. So you need 10 wind turbines in order to make up the difference. Now, I'm not sure right off the top of my head exactly how much. Yeah, so 370 metal to make 10 wind turbines. And if I pull out my handy calculator here, I guess we could just do the math while we're watching and waiting. 10 wind turbines times, let's say an average power of 8, right? It's going to be, that's going to be 80 energy, where the advanced solar produces 75 energy. So you can see that if the wind is good, it'll be slightly more efficient to have windmills. If the wind is bad, it's going to be slightly less efficient. But I think the consistency is really important here, and especially because we're going to have to charge up the nuke. And remember, the nuke takes 1,000 energy in order to charge. So we really have to get into that T2 economy if we want to actually have enough energy and enough metal to build a nuclear launcher. So you can see I've set up a few energy collectors with my commander before I'm going to send it over here. I don't sacrifice it right away because there's still some metal left over here that I can use to build these energy extractors, these solar collectors. and that is in the form of my bot lab. So this is 650 metal just lying in the form of a bot lab here, so I want to keep that in mind. I do detonate my commander. I'm going to send this guy over to start harvesting, but not after harvesting, or only after harvesting the bot lab. So we're metal stalling a little bit here on this construction turret, but the bot lab gets picked up. And for just a second, we probably spilled a little bit of metal there, but it's not too bad at all. Since we were stalling, we didn't really spill much, maybe 10 or so metal. Not the end of the world. There's bigger gaps in this that are more important here. At this point, I start reclaiming these wind turbines, doing that by clicking on the construction turret, hitting E, holding down Alt, left Alt, and then left clicking and dragging a circle on whatever I want to mass reclaim, and so in this case the wind turbines. Also reclaiming from my commander, of course, in order to fund this T2 bot lab. Important to get this T2 bot lab out so I can get the constructor bot. And then after that, I don't really need the T2 lab anymore, so I'm going to break it down for its metal as soon as I get that T2 bot out. So you can see I've queued up the T2 bot. I'm working on tearing down these wind turbines for whatever metal is tied up inside of them. See, it's not a ton, but it's enough that it's worth pulling them down, and especially for the space that they take up. Also leaves you prone to bombing. If they target your wind turbines, those can all chain react. So it's important to shift to less vulnerable energy production as soon as you can. Now we have a bit of an overproduction of energy and an underproduction of metal, and that's why these energy converters come into play here. Of course, turning all that excess energy we have into a little bit more metal for us, and that's going to benefit us greatly as we try and produce this T2 constructor. Now there's a few things that I do with this basically right away, and the first one is I build a fusion reactor and get everyone started on that. Then I use the T1 constructor to build a metal storage, and the reason you need the metal storage is because I want to break down this lab. This is 2,900 metal, and our storage is only at 850 right now. And then what I do is I go around with the T2 constructor and I start up metal extractors in all three of the spots, and I assign builders. Now this is one of the things that I definitely misplayed here. I should have had this T2 constructor go back to working on this metal extractor as opposed to working on this metal storage. And so for that, I lose a little bit of metal that was put into building this. Again, not a ton, but it does add up a little bit here and there. So that's one piece of fat that could be trimmed off of this build order here. Now, I'm not sure exactly when, but at some point I realized that, and I'm like, oh crap, why am I not building the third metal extractor? So I have him turn and look at that, and yeah, you see I queue it up there. So we do want to tear down this T2 bot lab. Again, 2,900 metal. That's definitely going to be important for upgrading all of our infrastructure, so we have the necessary funds to build up all of our stuff. So dedicating 2 build turrets to each of these metal extractors, basically just going to have these going in a round robin, upgrade all the metal extractors, and then we're going to start working on the fusion reactor. So you can see we're at 8 minutes. On the other map, we had a nuke up by the 10-minute mark, I believe. Somewhere around the 10-minute mark. And we fired the nuke by like 11 or 12. So it was really, really quick. On this, we really have to build a lot more infrastructure just because we need the energy, and we don't get that cheap energy from the geothermal plant. So there's a little more infrastructure that goes into building up for this nuke. So it takes a couple minutes longer. Not detrimental, I think. I mean, if your front lines are holding well enough, the difference between 10 and 15 minutes, it's significant, but hopefully they're good enough to hold. You definitely don't want to do this behind some weaker players, some newer players, because they're not going to be able to hold as efficiently as some of your better players might be able to. And for that reason, they might end up losing the front line in that 10 to 15 minute range. It's sort of when we expect to see T2 units start to come out. So very, very risky within that time frame. Now I use this res bot that I had eaten up the commander with to collect some of these shrubs over here. Always important to do this on whatever map you're playing on. There's usually some sort of buildings or structures or trees or plants or whatever that you can go eat up. So might as well do that in your free time. Gives you a little bit more energy to spend. And you can see that with 3 build turrets, we have just the right amount of build power that we're pretty much using as much energy as we can collect, although not all of it. So we are gaining up a little bit of energy, and that's good because the next thing that we want to build is a energy converter, right? The energy converter to turn all the energy that this produces into metal effectively, and that's something that this T21 is much more efficient at doing than the T1 energy converters. So that'll be the next queue that we do, and we're going to eat up one of these solar panels in order to finish off this fusion reactor. Remember that if you're building a energy production facility, you can tear down energy production facilities in order to fund it, because you're going to get a net positive as long as you're teching upwards. Kind of seems unintuitive to tear down the energy that you need to build the facility, but it does actually work in your favor most of the time anyway. You just have to be careful you don't remove all of your energy production, right? So this is another big fault that I make here, is that I'm actually accessing quite a bit of energy while I'm trying to build this up. And I think what I needed to do here was build a little more build power. So what I should have done, I was circling it here because I wanted to make sure that I highlighted this. I think what I probably should have done is thrown down a construction turret, probably 2 more construction turrets before building this energy extractor, or maybe in parallel, like while I'm building it. But I didn't, so I ended up leaking quite a bit of energy here, and we'll take a look in the end of the statistics of the total energy and metal excess, and I think there's definitely some fat to be trimmed up, but I think this serves well enough as a guide. So I think these build turrets should have gone down basically before building this energy converter rather. Now at this point I'm expanding the build power to work on the nuclear nuclear launcher, nuclear silo. Let me clear that mark, by the way, because I know that I want about 5 to 6 turrets. So I go for 6 here. Kind of ended up with this weird shape because I put the metal storage there, but it works out in the end. Now I was going to go for another fusion reactor, but then I thought the better of it, and I realized, well, there's probably enough metal production to be at least half of the build cost for the nuclear launcher. So I actually abandoned the fusion in place of just starting up the launcher. Yeah, you can see I'm just hovering here because I'm thinking about it. I'm like, is there enough? Won't there be enough? I'm not sure. And I decided to go for the nuke launcher, and I think it was the right decision here. You can see that we were using both of the advanced energy converters for a second there, which meant that we had balanced everything correctly. But at this point, it costs 66 metal per second in order to build the launcher, and we are producing 32 per second out of this energy converter and the advanced metal extractors. So I think that's a pretty good balance, because it does mean that this is going to our metal fund is going to decay at a pretty slow rate. We're basically going to be whittling that down very slowly, and of course that's basically what you want, is you spend time here. Now, there's an interesting balance that comes about when you build the nuclear launcher, because this uses up, like I've said before, 1,024 energy or something like that, 1,042. It uses up a little over 1,000 energy. So you kind of have to think of your economy like you are resetting it back down to like a T1 economy, where you only have an extra, 240 energy. Let's call it 200 energy to spend here. So the reason I send this T1 bot over here to make windmills is that I need to kind of think like I'm building up a T1 economy again. So I'm going to start building windmills, and then I'm going to transition, you'll see later, into the advanced solar panels. Kind of a tricky balancing act to think about that, but it is important to remember that you definitely don't want to stall your nuclear launcher on energy, otherwise the nuke won't come out as fast, and speed is the name of the game here. Now, this nuke launch, or this nuke rush, I would say, is a little less potent than the other one. In fact, it's definitely less potent. You really can expect that the enemy will have anti-nukes up by the 14-minute mark, like by default. That's kind of the golden zone. So sort of like, not sure, how worth this it will be. But I would say, if you know that you don't get scouted, right? If you don't see any planes from the enemy, nothing like that, it's probably worth it. And all in, it's basically just going to be a gamble, right? Like you're not really going to know if it's going to pay off. So just make sure that your team knows what you're doing, so that they don't all look back at you and think, oh, what the hell? This guy's produced nothing in 15 minutes of gameplay and still doesn't have a nuke out, right? So you can see there I ate up some of those solar panels in order to fund the rest of the nuke. It'll look a bit weird because I am going to build more solar panels later on. You can see I send the constructor over here to help the bot, but then I think better of it, and I think, okay, well, actually what I want to do is, now that I have some wind turbines, I want to expand into advanced solar, and I just want to make sure that I don't overtax my system on energy. So now it's sort of a waiting game. The nuke finished up at, let's call that 1436, and now it's just a waiting game until the first nuke is charged. So 1436, the nuke cannon goes down, the nuke builder, the nuke silo, the launcher. And we're going to see how I continue to expand out of here. So you see I cancel the windmill production and I start sending this guy backwards. I didn't really need to march this T2 over to him, but I queued that beforehand and it wasn't worth the APM to march it back again. So I just rallied it onto the worker, so it'll just help with that. And so I was looking at my energy and I was looking at the cost of a advanced solar collector, and you can see that it's 5,000 energy and I have an excess of 7,000. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I can build one advanced solar collector and then stop, and then basically just wait for my energy to build up again. So I start one and then I stop it, and then I'm just waiting, right? Because I'm using 1,000 energy plus a little more for the metal extractors. That's also important to remember. These are pretty greedy. So now I'm waiting for my power to build back up, and once it gets a little higher, then I'm going to start up the next one, and so on and so forth. And basically that's just to make sure that I do not stall this nuclear launcher in any way, shape, or form. It's the last thing that you want to do. About 16 minutes now. The nuke is almost charged, like 2/3 of the way done. The energy is back up again, so I start up this, and this is another critical error that I make. Instead of pausing this, I forget to pause it, and so it starts up the next thing, and I catch it almost immediately. I pause all my turrets, I pause my builder, everybody's paused, and I realize that I've spent a bunch of energy, and so now the nuke launcher stalls for a second there. So that's a huge blunder right there. I shouldn't have stalled my nuke launcher, because that's just going to mean an extra couple seconds that this thing isn't firing, isn't charging, and at that point, that's really bad. But anyway, once that energy had built back up again, I finish out this advanced solar collector, and then I keep building these because at this point the nuke has fired, so I'm clear to start building up some more energy production. And at this point, with 4 of these down, we're producing essentially in excess of 400 energy plus the windmills, give or take a little bit because of the metal extractors. Now the nuke has fired, and we're going to stop the clock officially when the nuke lands. So let's call it a sub 17 nuke launch. It's 1657 nuke launch. And that's pretty good. I think you can probably get it under 15 if you're really goated with the sauce. But I think this is probably the best that I could do. I know that there's a little bit of fat to trim off this, and so take notes, and after you've watched this, write down in the comments anything that you saw that I might have missed, any inefficiencies that you might have noted. I'm by no means the best at Beyond Our Reason, but I've been playing long enough that I kind of understand the economy flow and sort of how much different things cost and what you're really supposed to be spending your money on. I do keep playing here because I wanted to try out how you would build out of having a nuke launcher that costs so much energy and build it back into like a T2 economy or a T1 economy or something to basically get yourself back into the game. So I built some of these advanced solar collectors, hoping that it would be enough energy to produce enough metal to fund my expansion. And so you see these advanced energy converters kick on, sort of waiting for metal to come up. But anyway, that is the end of the nuke tutorial. And I hope this was helpful. I hope this kind of shows you what you need if you want to go for a nuke rush. This helps some of the new players that are hoping to go for the nukes, because they are awesome in this game, right? Like they feel so much more impactful than games like StarCraft or others where the nukes are kind of just like ticklish, right? Like they do a lot of damage to units, but they don't do much to bases. They actually devastate this battlefield. So I think that's one of the most important parts about them. But I hope this was informative. Again, if you're looking for the tutorial on this, here it is. But be warned that you should definitely communicate with your team if you want to do this again, because you're taking yourself out of the game until at least what was that 15 or 1657. So make sure that you're communicating thoroughly. Anyway, this has been the Brightworks. Thank you very much for watching. Consider subscribing or checking out some of the other videos, or both, if you are interested in this kind of gameplay tutorial. There's also casts. I do a lot of casting, And if you're interested in learning more about bar, I definitely recommend that you join our lovely little community. I'll leave you here with the statistics page. We can take a look at the metal excess and the energy excess. Yeah, not bad on the metal excess. Only 8 metal excess, so that's not bad. 2.3k energy excess, though. That's pretty bad. That is. I mean, if you think about that in terms of metal, every 600 of that turns into 10 metal. So 6, 12, 18, almost 40 metal excess in energy there. It's not. I mean, it's not awful. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely some fat that could be trimmed off of this build. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.